Hello everyone, my name is Mia Irvin. We are group number 4, which chose to research statewide issues in both Arizona and Illinois. Our group chose to focus primarily on taxation. We believe that taxation is a surefire way to gauge what a society is prioritizing, how it's spending its tax dollars to help the citizens within that society. So specifically, our group chose to focus on Prop 207 and Prop 208, and then we compared that to Illinois. So, for example, Arizona just actually voted yes to legalize marijuana. So, how is Illinois using the tax dollars that are generated from marijuana being legal in Illinois? And how is Arizona going to use those tax dollars? We also talked about education in both Arizona and Illinois and how that's being funded. So, here is our research.
Under the Cannabis Regulation and Taxation Act that was enforced on January 1st, 2020, Governor J.B. Pritzker finally legalized recreational marijuana for adult use. So under this act, dispensaries began to open. You could go purchase marijuana medically or just recreationally. Consumers aged 21 and older with or without a medical card could purchase, and there were still legal possessions on how much you could. For example, 30 grams of cannabis flower, cannabis-infused products that had 500 milligrams of THC. So there definitely were still restrictions on how much you could buy. Because of this legalization, a lot of revenue came into the state. For example, 52 million in adult use cannabis tax revenue came into the state. So all this revenue came simply from the taxation that was put on this marijuana. So for example, there were products that had less than 35 THC had a 10% sales tax. Cannabis infused products had a 20% tax, and any product that had more than 35% of THC had a 25% tax. So because of all this taxing, there were a lot of economic benefits and a lot of tax revenue that came back into the state, which was either put into the state or put into the communities. So this revenue that was put back into the communities aided communities that were impacted by the criminal justice system. Also, they were put into public health campaigns like substance abuse programs for drugs and alcohol. And also, more importantly, a lot of these minor marijuana-related convictions were expunged. So people who were deemed criminals now had their records gone, which was really good. Some challenges that came to the state were mainly focused on the supply shortage because of the high demand. The state of Illinois wasn't really prepared for this high demand of marijuana. So now the real question is, we need to push and prioritize medical patients over recreational uses. But overall, legalization of weed is doing pretty good in the state of Illinois.
Hi, my name is Cole Dreyer, and I'll be covering some of the details surrounding Prop 207, one of the top ballot initiatives on the ballot this year for Arizona. So many states have been considering legalizing marijuana for about the last 2 decades, and Arizona has had it on its ballot for at least the last couple of years or so. And this is the first year that's actually been very prominent and with a very high chance of actually passing. If Prop 207 is passed, a use and sale of marijuana will be taxed the same as tobacco and alcohol at about 16%. According to some news sources, this increase in tax revenue will average out about 166 million in the first few years of being operational. This new increase in tax revenue will go to multiple different agencies and funds in the state of Arizona. According to Ballotpedia, about 33% of this revenue will go to the community college districts, about 31.4% of it will go to municipal police and fire districts, about 25.4% of it will go to the highway user fund. If you're from Arizona, you've seen our highways, it's awful, we really need it. About 10% of it will go to the new Justice Reinvestment Fund, and the last 0.2% of it will go to the Arizona Attorney General and other local agencies that are tasked with enforcing the regulations that comes with passing Prop 207. Like I said, it's been on the ballot for a number of years, and there are a lot of key arguments in favor of passing Prop 207. One of the biggest concerns that most people have is how it will affect children, and Prop 207 highlights that it will protect children by requiring all products to be packaged in child-proof packaging and being labeled being labeled properly. Prop 27 also bans the advertising to children and the sale of products that represents different children products, such as gummy bears or gummy worms, anything like that. Prop 27 also highlights how it will protect public safety, as it does ban smoking in public spaces. It has to be in the private home, and that there would be a zero tolerance rule in place for impaired drivers under the use of marijuana, which is a little different than our current alcohol driving impaired rules, where you can still drive with a 0.08% blood alcohol concentration. Prop 27 also protects your health, as the Department of Health Services is tasked with regulating and limiting the amount of THC content in each product that is sold. And Prop 207 is also speculated to help law enforcement, as law enforcement will worry less about minor, petty marijuana related crimes and will be able to focus more time and more resources into more serious crimes. But just as there's a couple arguments in favor of Prop 207, there are also plenty against it. Some of the bigger ones, according to Chamber Business News, claims that marijuana usage would increase in young adults about ages 18 to 25, as was seen in some of the other states that passed it. One of the major concerns is that different employers will have a hard time finding employees, because Prop 27 still respects the alcohol and drug-free workplace, and they're worried about not being able to find enough employees that are not able to pass the federal drug test. And also, one of the biggest concerns is that even with the zero tolerance rule, that DUIs would still increase, as was seen in Colorado and Washington. So there's a lot of pros and a lot of benefits and a lot of arguments against it, and I guess we'll see what happens.
So I've been conducting my research on Illinois' public education system, particularly how it's funded. And to really understand some of the core issues, you have to look at funding at each level of the government. So at the federal level, about 7% of the total funds for the public education system come from federal grants. About 20% comes from the state, particularly through the general state aid, and the rest of it comes from the local level, particularly through property taxes and personal property replacement. Now, this sounds all well and good, but in practice, there's such a high variance in property value and income that it leads to a high discrepancy in the quality of education that students are receiving across the state, which is obviously a very large problem. Also, there are loopholes that can be exploited at both the state and local level to get funds when maybe you don't actually need them, which causes a number of other issues on top of the ones that I've already mentioned. But in 2017, there was an effort to change that through the Student Success Funding Act. Basically, it was an attempt to create a more equitable and adequate funding formula. And although this was a step in the right direction, Illinois still remains one of the worst states when it comes to public education funding. So not a lot of progress was made, but there was an attempt. We currently still have a lot of issues with public education funding, especially with COVID and some of the problems that has created. We definitely have been under a microscope in terms of public education funding, and a lot of people are looking about how the system runs, and the flaws are more visible than ever right now. So it's definitely a hot button issue. Even if it wasn't on our ballot this year, it's definitely a topic of conversation still in Illinois. So that was pretty much an overview of Illinois' public education funding system.
Hello everyone, my name is Alicia Sinigini. I'm going to be telling you about Proposition 208. So this general election on November 3rd, Arizona voters had a chance to vote on Proposition 208, which is basically the ballot initiative that proposed that there is a 3.5% increase on the income tax for people who made more than $250,000 a year in single filing. If a married couple were to make more than $500,000 a year, then this increase in income tax by 3.5% would apply to those two types of people. And so the money collected from the increase in income tax for this ballot, the money collected, the tax revenue, will be used to give back to the community, in the sense that it would be distributed to teachers and classroom support staff salaries, teacher mentoring and retention programs, career and technical education programs, and the Arizona Teachers Academy. So it would essentially be used to improve public education in Arizona.
I'm Jacob Brown, and throughout this discussion, we've reviewed some of the key issues in our two states. from marijuana legalization and taxation to the rigorous and sometimes highly localized issue of education spending and taxes. These issues really do impact us all. So while Illinois has provided somewhat of a blueprint for Arizona's marijuana legalization plan, the key issue remains how Arizona is going to allocate its possible and newfound tax revenue. Both states really do have a severe problem with underfunding in their education systems, and an increase in revenue could prove a possible solution. And the current education funding situation in both states really is of the utmost importance. So in this election, which is still playing out, the people of Arizona and Illinois will make their voices heard in these major decisions once the votes are counted. So yeah, we hope we've provided a comprehensive overview of these key state issues, and thank you so much for listening.